The night my dad told me, "You're on your own now," he didn't even look up from his glass of whiskey. Like I was already erased. Like I didn't matter anymore. One minute I was his daughter, sitting at the same dining table I'd grown up at, and the next, I was standing on the front porch with a suitcase and $43 in my wallet. My mom didn't stop him. My sister actually smirked. And the worst part? They all thought I'd come crawling back. They were sure I couldn't survive without them. Honestly, for a few hours, I almost believed them. Sitting in my car that night, scrolling through my phone, trying to figure out where I could even go. I felt completely broken. Until I remembered something my grandfather had pressed into my hand years ago. A plain, old card. Nothing special about it, except for the way he looked at me when he said, "Only use this when you have no one left." I had laughed back then. I wasn't laughing anymore. Because the next morning, I walked into a bank, handed over that card, and within seconds, everything changed. And what happened after that? My father wasn't ignoring me anymore. He was calling. Repeatedly. I'm 27, married now, and living a life that looks nothing like the one my family said I deserved. But back then, I was the disappointment. The daughter who didn't follow the plan, didn't marry rich, didn't stay quiet. My parents had always been obsessed with control, especially my dad. If you fit into his version of success, you were rewarded. If you didn't, you were invisible. My younger sister played the game perfectly. I didn't. That night wasn't even the first time he threatened to cut me off, but it was the first time he actually did it. And he meant it. No calls. No messages. No help. Just silence, like I'd never existed. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my grandfather had seen this coming long before he passed. He never trusted the way my dad treated me. And right before he died, he made me promise something I didn't fully understand at the time. When they show you who they really are, he said, don't argue, don't beg, just walk away and use what I gave you. That old card had been sitting in my wallet for years. Forgotten. Ignored. Until the day I had nothing left to lose. The night everything fell apart started like any other family dinner, tense, quiet, and filled with things no one wanted to say out loud. My dad sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone between bites like we were all just background noise in his life. My mom kept glancing at him, waiting for cues like she always did, and my sister looked way too comfortable, like she already knew how the night was going to end. I should have seen it coming, honestly. The way my dad suddenly put his phone down. The way he leaned back in his chair and looked directly at me, not with anger, but with something colder. Final. So, he said, swirling his drink, I heard you quit your job. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even told them yet. I didn't quit, I said carefully. I left because it wasn't right for me. He laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind that's meant to make you feel small. Not right for you, he repeated. Or you just couldn't handle it? My sister smirked into her glass, and I felt that familiar burn in my chest, the one that came every time he reduced me to nothing in front of everyone. I'm figuring things out, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I have a plan. That's when he slammed his glass down just hard enough to make my mom flinch. You always have a plan, he snapped. And yet you're always the one with nothing to show for it. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. I'm not asking you for anything, I said quietly. Good, he shot back instantly. Because you're not getting anything. The words hung there for a second, like even he was deciding how far he wanted to take it. Then he leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. You're 27. If you can't get your life together by now, that's on you. I'm done supporting your mistakes. My mom finally spoke, but it wasn't to defend me. Maybe you should just apologize, she murmured, like this was somehow my fault. I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. Apologize for what? I asked. But my dad didn't give her time to answer. No, he said sharply. We're not doing this again. Then, without hesitation, he pointed toward the front door. You're on your own now. It didn't feel real at first. Like I was watching it happen to someone else. You're serious? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Completely, he said, already picking his phone back up like the conversation was over. My sister didn't even try to hide her smile this time. My mom just looked down at her plate. And just like that, I knew there was nothing left for me in that house. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. I just stood up, walked to my room, and packed whatever I could fit into one suitcase. No one followed me. No one stopped me. When I walked past the dining room again, they were already back to eating like nothing had happened. Like I had already disappeared. The door clicked shut behind me louder than I expected, echoing into the night as I stood there on the porch, gripping the handle of my suitcase like it was the only thing keeping me steady. I waited. Just for a second. For someone to come after me. For my mom to call my name. For my dad to change his mind. But nothing happened. The house stayed quiet. Cold. Final. And that's when it hit me, I really was on my own. I sat in my car for almost an hour that night, parked 2 streets away like somehow distance would make it feel less real, staring at my phone with no one to call and nowhere to go, the silence pressing in so hard it felt louder than any argument we'd just had, and for the first time in my life, I realized I had been completely cut off, not just financially, but emotionally too. Like they had been waiting for the moment to finally let me fall, and the worst part was how calm they were about it, like I meant nothing, like losing me didn't cost them anything at all, and I kept thinking maybe this was some kind of test, maybe if I went back and apologized, said exactly what my dad wanted to hear, he'd open the door again and pretend none of it happened, but something inside me wouldn't let me do it, something small but stubborn that kept replaying the way he looked at me. When he said you're on your own, like he had already decided I was a failure long before that night, so instead of turning the car around, I leaned my head back against the seat and just sat there, trying to figure out what on your own even looked like when you had exactly $43, half a tank of gas, and no plan, and that's when my mind drifted somewhere I hadn't gone in years, to my grandfather, to the last time I saw him before he passed, the way he had called me into his study while everyone else was downstairs arguing about something trivial, his voice quieter than usual but steady, like he already knew his time was running out, and I remember sitting across from him, not really paying attention at first because I thought it was just another one of his long talks about life and choices and things I didn't fully understand back then, until he reached into his drawer and pulled out that card, sliding it across the desk toward me like it was something fragile. Something important, and I actually laughed when I picked it up because it looked so ordinary, no flashy design, no obvious meaning, just a simple card with a name I didn't recognize, and I asked him what it was for, half expecting some kind of joke, but he didn't smile, not even a little, he just looked at me in that serious way he rarely did and said, "This is not for now," which instantly made me curious, but also confused, and when I tried to hand it back, telling him I didn't need anything, he gently pushed my hand back toward me and closed my fingers around it. "You might not need it today," he said, "but there may come a time when you realize you have no one left to rely on," and I remember rolling my eyes a little, because back then, despite everything, I still believed family meant something unbreakable, that no matter how bad things got, there was always a line they wouldn't cross, and he must have seen that in my face because he sighed softly and added, "When that day comes, don't argue with them, don't try to prove anything, just walk away, and use this," and I asked him what it actually did, what was so special about it, but he just shook his head slightly and said, "You'll understand when the time is right," which honestly frustrated me more than anything, because I wanted answers, I wanted something concrete, but instead, all I got was a mystery and a promise that didn't make sense, so I shoved the card into my wallet and forgot about it almost immediately. Life moved on. He passed away a few months later, and everything he said slowly faded into the background of my memory, until that night, sitting alone in my car, cut off from everything I thought I had, I reached into my wallet looking for anything useful, cash, receipts, something, and my fingers brushed against something I hadn't touched in years, and when I pulled it out and looked at it again under the dim glow of the streetlight, my chest tightened because suddenly his words didn't feel vague anymore, they felt exact, like he had been talking about this exact moment, this exact night, and for the first time since I left the house, I felt something different from fear or anger, something closer to curiosity, mixed with a strange sense of certainty that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as they thought I was. The next morning, I didn't overthink it, because if I had, I probably would have talked myself out of it, convinced myself it was just an old memory clinging to false hope. So instead I drove straight to the nearest bank that matched the name on the card, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than they needed to as my mind raced through every possible outcome, most of them ending with disappointment. But something deeper kept pushing me forward, and when I finally walked inside, I felt completely out of place, like everyone could somehow tell I didn't belong there, that I had just been thrown out of my own home less than 12 hours ago, that I had nowhere to go if this didn't work, and for a second I almost turned around and left, but then I remembered my grandfather's voice again, calm and certain, telling me not to hesitate when the time came, so I walked up to the counter, forced a small, steady smile, and slid the card across to the teller, who barely glanced at it at first, treating it like any other transaction, until something shifted in her expression, subtle at first, like confusion, then quickly replaced by something sharper, more alert, and she looked up at me again, this time really looking like she was trying to match me to something she couldn't quite place. "One moment," she said quietly, her tone completely different now, and before I could even respond, she picked up the card and disappeared into a back office, leaving me standing there with a growing knot in my stomach, seconds stretching into minutes as I replayed every doubt I'd had, every reason this might not work, until finally a man in a suit stepped out. Someone who clearly wasn't a regular employee, his posture straight, his expression carefully controlled, but there was no mistaking the tension in the way he held the card in his hand, and when he approached me, his voice was calm but firm. "Ma'am, could you come with me for a moment?" And at that point I was too deep in to back out, so I nodded and followed him into a private office, my heart pounding louder with every step, and once the door closed behind us, he turned to face me, placing the card gently on the desk between us like it was something far more valuable than it looked. "Can you tell me where you got this?" he asked, and for a split second I hesitated, not because I didn't know the answer, but because something about the way he asked made it feel bigger than just a simple question. "My grandfather gave it to me," I said finally, watching his reaction closely, and the moment I said that, something in his expression changed, not dramatically, but enough to confirm that this wasn't normal, that this card meant something I didn't fully understand yet, and he took a slow breath before asking, "And your grandfather's name?" When I told him, the reaction was immediate, a flicker of recognition that he tried to hide but couldn't completely, and he leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me with a new level of attention, like everything about me suddenly mattered in a way it hadn't just minutes ago, and then he said something that made my entire world shift. "We've been expecting you," and for a second I thought I misheard him, because nothing about my situation made that sentence make sense, but before I could question it, he continued, explaining that my grandfather had set something up years ago, something private, something protected, specifically for me, and as he spoke, pieces started falling into place in a way that made my chest tighten with a mix of disbelief and realization, because this wasn't just some emergency fund or forgotten account, this was something far bigger, something that had been waiting quietly in the background of my life until the exact moment I needed it. And as he turned his monitor toward me and began to show me what was attached to that card, I felt the last piece of doubt disappear, replaced by something else entirely, power, the kind I had never felt before, the kind my father had always made sure I never had, and in that moment, sitting in that office with that card in front of me, I realized something that would change everything going forward. I was never as powerless as they thought I was. What he showed me on that screen didn't feel real at first, like I was looking at someone else's life instead of mine, numbers I couldn't even process attached to accounts my grandfather had quietly set up over years, investments, properties, protections layered so carefully that no one, not even my father, had any access or visibility into them, and the bank manager explained it all in a calm, measured tone, like this level of preparation wasn't shocking at all, like it was simply part of a plan that had been waiting for me to step into it. And the more he talked, the more everything my grandfather had ever said started to make sense in a way it never had before, because he hadn't just been giving me a backup plan, he had been giving me independence, something my father had spent my entire life trying to control. And the realization hit me so hard I had to steady my hands on the desk, because just hours ago I had been sitting in my car thinking I had nothing, and now I was being told I had everything I needed to build a life on my own terms, without begging, without proving anything to anyone. And before I could even fully process it, my phone started vibrating on the desk beside me, the sound sharp and sudden in the quiet room. And when I glanced down at the screen, my chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something colder, sharper, because it was my dad calling, over and over again, his name flashing across the screen like he suddenly remembered I existed, like I mattered again now that something had shifted. And I didn't answer, not at first. I just let it ring while the bank manager continued explaining next steps, how everything was legally secured, how no one could challenge it, how it had all been designed to activate only when I came forward with that card. And there was something almost satisfying about the timing of it, like my grandfather had known exactly when I would need it most, like he had waited until the moment I was completely cut off before handing me a way out that no one could take from me. And when my phone finally stopped ringing, a message came through almost instantly, then another, and another, each one more urgent than the last, my dad asking where I was, what I had done, why the bank had contacted him. And that's when I looked up at the manager, confused, because I hadn't given them permission to call anyone. But he clarified quickly, explaining that certain movements tied to the legacy accounts automatically triggered notifications to previous associated parties, people who had once tried to claim control, people like my father. And suddenly everything clicked into place, because this wasn't just about money, it was about exposure, about revealing something my dad had either forgotten or assumed would never surface. And for the first time, the power dynamic I had lived under my entire life flipped completely, because now he wasn't the one deciding my worth, he was the one reacting to it, chasing it, trying to understand something he no longer had control over. And I finally picked up the phone, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to hear it, to hear the shift in his voice. And the moment I answered, there was no anger, no authority, just tension and something dangerously close to panic as he asked me what I had done. And I leaned back slightly in my chair, looking at that card still resting on the desk. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to him at all. I let him talk for a few seconds, long enough to hear the shift, long enough to feel the panic he used to make me feel, but this time it didn't reach me, it just confirmed everything I already knew. And when he finally paused, waiting for answers, I kept my voice calm and simple and said, "You told me I was on my own, so I am." And the silence on the other end hit harder than anything he'd ever said to me before, because for the first time, he had no control, no leverage, no way to pull me back into the version of me he understood. And I didn't stay on the call long after that. I didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't give him anything he could twist or use. I just ended it. And as I sat there in that office, with everything my grandfather had left me finally clear, I realized something that felt better than revenge. It was freedom, real freedom, the kind that doesn't need validation or approval. And later that day, when my dad called again and again, I didn't answer once, because karma doesn't always show up loud, it shows up in silence, in distance, in the moment someone realizes they've lost access to you completely. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes the greatest comeback isn't proving them wrong, it's becoming untouchable. So if you've ever been told you're nothing without someone else, remember this: sometimes walking away is exactly what changes everything. And if this story hit you even a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because you never know who needs to hear it next.